Hi guys, I'm so glad to be back. Let me tell you, over the summer I had to watch my kids, stay with my kids, do all the things with the kids. But I'm back now, finally. Yesterday I know I said I was going to have the video out, but I didn't check my camera first. So when I went to go and turn it on, it didn't turn on. It didn't do anything because it's completely and utterly dead. So it takes like 4 hours for it to charge. So we're doing it today, all right? If you're new here, my name is Brandy, and what I do is I bring dark history kind of back to life via witches, vampires, anything like that, anything supernatural, werewolves, things like that, things that people were accused of. And I go through it, and while I do that, I put makeup on my face. So if that sounds awesome to you, definitely stick around because today we're talking about Rosaleen Norton, okay? And she was an Australian occultist and artist, and she incorporated her art from the visions that she had. This woman was a self-proclaimed witch by the age of 5, and she was counting witches' marks on her knees by the time she was 7. So let's go ahead and get into it and get this party started. So Rosaleen was a occultist, like I say, and she was an artist, and she would paint the visions that she saw and things of that matter. But before we get that deep into it, she was born in 1917 in New Zealand, okay? And it was shortly thereafter that her family moved to Australia, okay? Now, while she was in Australia, she lived outside of the norm ever since she was a kid. She was always very true to herself. That's what you're going to find when it comes to this chick. She was always true to herself. So when they moved to Australia, she ends up putting a tent in the backyard of her parents' home as a child. And she lives outside in their garden for 3 years. Yeah, she does. And she communes with nature. And and this is her as a child. She is self-proclaimed witch. She has friends that are like toads and frogs and all kinds of different things, you know? I mean, this woman reminds me so much of myself, and I'll tell you why. That's all I did when I was a kid, was play outside. I mean, you couldn't get me to come inside for nothing. I was in a creek, I was in the woods, I was on a path, I was riding a bike, I was climbing a tree. I was always doing something, you know? And I feel like this is how she is. And if you imagine that she's born in 1917, there is a certain kind of look that women should have for back then, according to the public back then. And she did not want to adhere to those societal norms, if you see what I'm saying. So not only did she collect like toads, goats, lizards, and spiders, there was actually a spider that hung in the garden with its web that was kind of over her tent, and most of the people were kind of afraid to go near it because it's a spider, you know. But she had no fear of these things, you know. Even as a child, like I say, she had no fear of these things. So she lived in her parents' garden, you know, for 3 years, and she develops her craft. Basically, she starts to have visions of all different kinds of things. She said she saw a lady in a gray dress. She would have visions of some lady in a gray dress, and she would have visions of dragons, and she had all kinds of stuff, all kinds of visions. And then she decided to start painting these visions. Now, when I say she's an occultist, you're probably like, well, what kind of occultist is she? I mean, there's so many different brands of witches out there, it's unreal. She would astral project. Like I say, she had visions. So when she got older, she would ingest like LSD and things like that so that she could experience a higher level of consciousness, so that she could see herself outside of her body. And so this is what she would start doing even as a kid, is that she would try to astral project, or she would have these visions or these dreams of these certain things, and then she would put them down on paper, on paint and paper. And these are just visions, that she saw in her head. I say that she wasn't about societal norms, but I ain't gonna lie, she did try, you guys. She tried, okay? So when she was 17, she got married. She did. And this man went off to war, because this is a lot of war times and stuff like that. And she stayed home. He didn't come back. And it wasn't because he died, or it wasn't because he got hurt. It's because he didn't love her anymore. And so at 17, she dips out of Sydney, Australia, and she finally makes it to King's Cross. And this is where she becomes known as the Witch of King's Cross, because she starts to paint. She starts to paint her visions. And her visions are very scary to people. And she meets a man, okay? She meets a man, and they end up starting to do sex magic, okay? And I'll explain to you what that is. So my husband told me this story the other day about this girl who had never seen a picture of Jesus before, okay? And she had a vision, and she painted her vision, okay? And the picture, for somebody who had never seen a picture of Jesus, was pretty spot on with what we think that Jesus looked like back then, right? But yet she had never seen a picture of Jesus. She had only seen it in a vision. And of course, everybody's like, oh my God, this is fantastic. This is great. She is a true visionary. It's Jesus. But let me tell you guys, when Rosaleen starts to paint, and she starts to paint Pan, who is the Greek god of nature, and the way that she sees him, people freak out, okay? So before I get to the sex magic, she's going to incorporate the sex magic along with the visions that she has, and that becomes her art, and therefore in Australia at this time becomes very profane and obscene, okay? Even though this is art, she is very much so an artist, but she is also a self-proclaimed witch, like I say. And she had no qualms with holding that back from anybody. So she meets a man named Gavin Greenlees, okay? And they start to do sex magic and trance magic together. Now, the person that brought sex magic into the world is Aleister Crowley. He's actually a guy that I'm going to do a video on. It's probably going to be a long one because he has a huge influence over the witchcraft world. But Aleister Crowley was the very first person to even really talk about sex magic, like in a book. He wrote a book. And so he wrote about this, and Rosaleen picked up on it and was like, hey, this is cool. And then she finds a guy named Gavin. Her husband is long gone. He's off doing whatever he wants to do. And so she's here, and she's in King's Cross, and she's trying to base her artwork there, and she's trying to establish her name, and she meets Gavin. And then the sex magic begins. Aleister developed this in 1904, and it basically involves a bunch of rituals that involve different sexual acts. Okay, and none of these acts that she performed had any kind of animal sacrifice or anything like that. This was just sex magic, and she would have outer body experiences, especially if she was doing it while she was taking a hallucinogen. Yeah. So when she's taking these drugs and she's doing this sex magic and things like that, she is having visions. And when she paints these visions, and they're beautiful, Beautiful pieces of art, lots of bright, beautiful colors, all kinds of things. So like I said, Norton and Greenlees, they develop their own little kind of sexual magic. They go into trance magic, sex magic, ceremonies, combining and improvising several of the elements from different traditions, including Kundalini, which is the feminine creative force of infinite wisdom that lives inside of us, represented by a snake, and Tantra, which is encompassing esoteric rituals and practices from Hindu and Buddhist traditions. So this is what they did. It was nothing dark about it, even though some of her paintings do look a little bit dark. But she was also a pantheist. She was a full, firm believer in Pan, the Greek god of nature. She worshipped nature. She loved animals, loved insects. She was a very loving person, but she just had a different view on the world. Like I said, she tried to be a wife, didn't work out. So she's like, guess what? I don't have to marry up. I don't have to have kids if I don't want to. If I want to sit here and take my LSD and then paint what I'm seeing, that's what I'm going to do. And that's exactly what she did. She used these practices to augment her conscious, okay, so that she could see and feel different things. And that's basically what she did. That was her thing. She was trying to inspire and empower her art by, kind of, mixing things up. She wasn't afraid of who she was, okay? Because like we know, most of these witches that I talk about were just women. They were women that had a special gift. They were women that were midwives. They were women that had healing knowledge passed down to them from decade to decade to decade. And then it just ends, because somebody feels like what they do, because they're a woman, they can't do that, which is so bizarre. So don't worry, I'm going to put some of her art up because it's absolutely beautiful, the ones that I can put up, because she does get a little sexual in nature, which, hey, not a prude, totally down with that, it's totally fine. But as an artist, she really drew and painted her beliefs, like I keep telling you guys. She had no fears or anything like that, but yet there's people in the world, unfortunately, and in Australia during this time, like 86% of the population was Christian, okay? Yeah, so she already had issues. And the funny thing is that witchcraft was against the law, but that's not what they were going after her for. It's actually kind of weird. So anyway, she was a very free spirit. She went away from any kind of societal expectation. She's like, nah, you expect me to do something, I'm definitely not going to do it. I'm going to do it what I want to do it type of woman. So not only was she a witch, she was also bisexual. Now, and of course, being in the time that we're being in, she was born in 1917, so now we're probably, if she's around 23 years old, 25, that's when she met Greenlees. And they start their magic thing, and they even start having like close friends come into the circle, almost as if like a coven, and she would trust those people with some of her rituals that her and Greenlees come up with. So not only because she was a witch, she was also attacked because of her art, because like I say, some of it was very sexual in nature, which, there's nothing wrong with that. But back then, that was a little bit over the line for back then. We're talking about, 1920s, 1930s here. And she's painting what she perceives as Pan, the Greek god of nature. In some of these ways, he looks incredibly demonic to some people. It depends on what your definition of demonic is, I guess I could say. To me, I think it's beautiful. I think we all have different visions, and I don't think that anybody's vision is less than somebody else's just because maybe they didn't visualize God like that girl did that I was telling you guys about earlier. She was revered. I'm sure that's the wrong word, but She was celebrated, this little girl, for being able to paint a picture of somebody she's never seen before. Well, Rosaleen has never seen Pan before either. But she did in her dreams and in her astral projection and her trances. And so she painted him and she made an altar to him as well. Like I say, she's incredibly open about all of these things. But there comes a time when people, they will sit by and watch for a little while. But then somebody's got to start caring, There's got to be a caring out there. So our girl Rosaleen has an exhibition for her art at a very prestigious university, okay? She was attacked by the police because of her artwork. She was attacked by other people because she dressed in all black and wore men's attire, like a suit and a tie, and a hat. She wasn't a normal woman for the time, basically. She did whatever she wanted to, and there was nobody around to stop her, you know what I mean? But unfortunately, the police were like, yo, some of this stuff that you're showing at this university is obscene. And they took it and they burnt it. They burnt her artwork because they thought it was obscene. So we know that her appearance did not help at all whatsoever. She had very crooked teeth. She had very high arched eyebrows, like really, really high. Don't worry, plenty of pictures throughout this one. She had very arched eyebrows, and she was very, she was very like stand out in a crowd type person, but she liked to be a recluse at the same time too. Although she would never turn down like an interview from somebody, but she would shy away from like going out into the world to do that. Like if you could come to her home and talk to her about whatever, and she's totally open, and she'll show you her altar of Pan and this huge painting she has behind her of Pan that she did, and that's her altar to him, and she talks about all these things, and this is what makes her very peculiar. She was also known as the high priestess of the altar of Pan, which is where she would perform some rituals alone and some with her inner magic circle of people that I was telling you guys about, and they would do these rituals in Pan's honor. Let me just say straight up, she was not a feminist, okay? And she did not sacrifice animals. Anybody that even that bows down or with Pan does not mean there's animal sacrifice just because she's doing rituals. And people would say that. They would say she's doing animal sacrifices and blah, blah, blah. She's doing all these horrible things. It's not true though. She loved animals. She loved insects. She loved amphibians, lizards, whatever. She loved them all. She would never, ever, ever, ever hurt an animal. Not only does she talk to Pan, she also talks to Tarte, which is the Greek goddess presiding over all the witches. She talked to Lilith, which is an ancient female demon from Mesopotamia. I can make a later video about her because she's awesome. Isis, who is an Egyptian goddess, was also the heart of her practice. So it wasn't just Pan. She painted a lot of different kinds of Greek goddesses and gods that she saw in her visions. So just to give you guys a little bit more information about Pan. Pan was the center of her focus, okay? Pan was the god of nature associated with pasture land and its humid and animal inhabitants, okay? And Pan is half man and half goat with a very large sex drive. Now, most people back in the day, they're like, oh crap, horns, looks like a devil. If it looks like a devil, talks like a devil, quacks like a devil, they're gonna call it a devil, okay? And so the way she depicted Pan was in this way of him being a goat, okay, and a man. And that had horns, and that was, had a very healthy sex drive, which there's nothing wrong with that, That's what she saw in her visions. And who are we to sit here and tell her that she's wrong? Just saying. So we talked a lot about her sex magic and her rituals and things like that, but she would also do trance magic, like I was telling you guys, which is like basically you self-hypnotize. That's the best way I can put it. You hypnotize yourself. You almost go into like a super deep meditation, okay? And during these trance magic, of course, this is when she would have outer body experiences, she says, and she would go and visit other practitioners, as her astral projection or whatnot, so that way she could contact other practitioners in alternate spiritual spheres, basically. So I don't know if that means that she was like trying to talk to witches from the past that were already deceased, or if she was just using what they used to do. Like, I think she was just trying to reach out to other witches that were like her and trying to make a spiritual connection that way. So she would put herself into a trance, okay? And she would draw while she was in a trance. She would draw what was in her mind's eye onto the paper, and she would be in a state of consciousness and manifest the results in any way in a drawing, like I say. And then her art was formed by her magical experiences. I mean, she created art for her sacred spaces as well as exhibitions and publications, like I told you guys, from the 1950s. And since she featured Pan in a lot of her artwork, in 1957 she said, "His pipes are a symbol of magic and mystery, while his horns and hooves stand for natural energies and fleet-footed freedom." That's what she said, word for word. So now, not only is she's telling people the reason why Pan looks the way he does when she paints him, she's basically explaining the hooves are not of the devil. He is not of the devil, She's trying to convince people, And then we get to the exhibition, okay, for her artwork. So, of course, during this time, we do have the media. Oh, yes, the good old newspaper, you know what I mean? The newspaper made her out to be this crazy witch that did animal sacrifices and painted demons. That's what they printed, basically, about this woman, okay? Because, like I say, in 1954, 89.4% of the population in Australia was Christian. That's a huge percentage for a whole-ass country, I'm just saying. Yeah. So Norton's views of Pan were a little bit demonic to the Christians of Australia, yeah. And I can see where they would see that, because the Christians have been painted a vision of the devil, point blank period, of this red guy with horns and flames, maybe hoofs. He's gonna punch you for eternity in fire. That's what they believe, and so anything they see that resembles that is going to be the devil to them, even though what she's painting is a god of nature. The police watched her all the time, yeah. Like after they ended up burning off her artwork at one of her exhibitions, they would watch her all the time, basically waiting for her to screw up and do something obscene. Because remember, this video is a little weird because it's not about her witchcraft, even though she was incredibly open about that. Very open. It's more about how obscene she was viewed. People saw her as an obscene person or whatnot because of the way she painted. And so the newspapers, they would ask her, "Are you satanic? Do you worship the devil?" They would ask her all this crazy stuff, and of course she's like, no, this isn't the devil. This is Pan, the great god of nature, basically. And so not only were people accusing her of worshiping the devil and making animal sacrifices, which she was not, all because of the way she painted a certain god, the way she saw it inside of her mind. Nowadays, that would be reverent. That would be like, oh, they are so awesome. They are so great. But back then, it was obscene because she did have sexual undertones to her artwork. But like she says, Pan was very sexual and she did sex magic. So she liked sex. And what is wrong with that? You know, and she found a partner that liked it too. You know, good old Greenleaf's. And so what they end up doing after her artwork gets, you know, torched by the police, and the police are watching them, you know, and all this crazy stuff, she ends up making a book. She co-authors a book with Greenleaf's because he's a poet. I don't think I told y'all that. Greenleaf's is a poet, yeah. So it has pictures of her artwork in the book, and then it had poems by Greenleaf's in it, okay? And so they sold it. Well, guess what? Australia's like, yeah, no. This is obscene material, is what they think, okay? Very obscene. So obscene that the United States banned it. Yeah, they did. The United States, of all people. I mean, we'd let anybody get away with anything over here. Not back then. No, they did not. Even during the whole free and love movement and all that stuff that was happening in the United States, they were still trying to have control, of course, over books and things like that. So, like I told you guys earlier, during an exhibition, now this exhibition took place in 1949 in Melbourne, at the University of Melbourne to be exact. And this is where the police come and they confiscate all of her artwork because it's so obscene to them, and they burn it all, okay? Well, Rosaleen is she's not deterred that easily, okay? She's not gonna be like, yeah, give up. This woman don't give up, all right? She does not give up. She goes to court, not for witchcraft, but for being obscene with the artwork. By painting the artwork, it was making her look obscene. She got acquitted when she went to court. So yeah, she does go to court during this, y'all. Oh yes, she goes to court more than once, but never for witchcraft. Even though it didn't become legal in Australia, I think until the 70s. And so during this time, the witchcraft that she's talking about she's doing is totally illegal, but they totally don't care about that. They only care about the fact that she's painting pictures of demons, Pan, and making it lewd and sexual in nature, basically. Okay, so the book that her and Greenleaf's collabed on, okay, was named The Art of Rosaleen Norton with Poems by Gavin Greenleaf's. That was the name of the book. And this book put her in court again, okay, because it was obscene in nature, and Australia did not like it. They were like, nope, we're banning this book. You cannot bring this book into the country. No, you cannot. So the publishers, not only was she taken to court, the publishers were fined for publishing her book, okay? There were and so the book was banned. There was copies that were sent to New York, but as soon as they got to New York, they burned the copies of the book, y'all. Like, I want to see this book. I think you can get it now. I'm pretty sure you can. I mean, they can't make everything illegal in the U.S. forever, but I'm pretty sure they're a little bit more open when it comes to that kind of stuff now. But yeah, so it's banned in the United States. It's banned in Australia. It becomes a prohibited import, okay? There's a certain painting in there called the Faux. It's the book's very, very like notorious image or whatnot. And it represented her beliefs, like her witchcraft, her rituals, her occultism. This represented her beliefs. And so the goat, she said, is a symbol of energy and creativity, the serpent of elemental force and eternity. So even though most people saw Faux as obscene, satanic, gross, she's like, no, this is what represents my spirituality, basically. There's a light and there's a dark side, and she embraced both sides of herself. So, remember how I told you guys they had like a little circle of friends or whatnot? Okay, so one of their friends was named Eugene Goosens. Okay, now Eugene Goosen was a very huge, very cultural, social giant back in the day. This last name was very prestigious, I guess you could say. And so he saw the book, and he wants to get in touch with Rosaleen and Gavin. He's like, I want to get to know these people. And so he does, but he ends up getting in trouble with the law because he for one thing, he started hanging out with Rosaleen and her friend. And so the police are going to start watching them too. So the police start watching him. And when he comes home from going out of the country and comes back, he has copies of the books. Yes, he gets in trouble. He gets charged with importing illegal goods, of course, and including indecent works and articles, namely a number of books, prints, and photos, and a quality of film. So I guess they were starting to film their rituals, since this guy was kind of in their little inner circle or whatnot. That means he attended the rituals, okay? And so his career was ruined after this. This man's life was ruined because he saw these two people. People made his life a living hell. Now this guy's like a huge cultural social giant, and he is really, really pissed some people off by trying to bring this book into the country. He gets into a lot of trouble for it, like a lot. Now there's historians out there that will argue that Norton was polluted by these two individuals, by Rosaleen and her friend. But if you look back in the family history, their history goes back really, really far into the occult. They came to the country with full-blown knowledge of the occult, okay? So you can't say that he was influenced by them when he was already influenced by his own family. You see what I mean? He was already influenced. He's already into the occult. I think the sex magic is what made him a little bit more interested in it. And then once he got caught up in it, he didn't want to be the one that was like, it was me. You know what I mean? He didn't want to be that one. So he kind of got ostracized a little bit. And there's also a bunch of letters that he wrote, to Rosaleen that had his name. And so he really couldn't deny, that he sought them out. I mean, it was written in letters, like, hey, I'm so-and-so and I want to come and meet with you guys and blah, blah, blah. And so 3 of the letters were signed Dejin, which is Gossen's magical name that he had. So he even had a magical name. So it's like, how are people going to deny that this man had any part in the occult when he came to the country and his whole family had knowledge of the occult, okay? But then she had some so-called friends, okay? Yeah. So-called friends. She had a birthday party, and she had her friends invited, and other people came. Well, they decided they're going to take pictures. Yeah. And then they're going to distribute those pictures around. Now, in my personal opinion, that's distribution of not only private stuff, but pornography. I mean, right? So when they sold these pictures, the police went and raided the birthday party, okay? Charged her with unnatural sexual acts. What makes... No, I'm not going there. Not going there. So her local businesses, anybody that did anything with her, they were raided, looking for things, to have on her for being an obscene woman, supposedly. And so people tried to say that she did black magic. People said that she cursed them. Like, people were saying so many things to get this woman in jail for being obscene with her art. So after this whole entire debacle of everything, in the 1970s, she retires. Yes, she does. She retires. She retires, and she's very happy. She still paints. She's still painted and all that other kind of stuff, okay? She actually lived right down the road from her sister. So she was with her sister kind of in the late days. She practiced her magic until the very end. She painted and communed with animals and nature all the way up until she died. Okay. Now, her sister and her were visited by Green Lees on his temporary days of release. He was actually in a mental hospital from the age of 25. I don't know why he was in a mental hospital, but he was allowed to leave, and he would go and visit Rosaleen and her sister, of course. And and then he would go back to the mental hospital, you know. But at 61, unfortunately, Rosaleen is diagnosed with cancer. Yeah, I know, it sucks. She's done all those good things and has like really paved the way for women to be able to do what they want, especially when it comes to art and their sexuality. That it's just, you know, she was an amazing woman, and to be diagnosed with cancer and to have to die that way is a good thing compared to all of our other stories. But in another way, it's kind of sad because she was so one with nature, you know. When I tell you guys, she was more than just a witch. She was a woman that literally jump-started the idea that you don't have to get married and have kids. No. You don't have to stay with, you know, have one partner your entire life if you don't want. You know? You don't. And she was living proof of that you could totally do that and be totally fine. Although she was ostracized her entire life, she lived freely and she lived on her terms. And that's what's important in this situation, okay? She lived on her terms. She did what she wanted to do, point blank period, and she didn't care what people thought about it. And she was very, very open. As a witch, I think that's amazing. I didn't come out of the closet as a witch until like 5 years ago, but I've been practicing for years. All because of I'm afraid of where I'm at right now, of the state that I'm in and the place that I'm at, but that is what it is. But for this woman to go through all these things that she went through, and she did so very happily, in my opinion. She didn't care what people thought about her. She didn't care if her looks weren't up to par. She didn't care that, you know, she did try to get married and the guy was like, yeah, I'm not coming home after the war. She's like, done with that. I'm gonna go and do what I feel like I was born to do. She thought she was a witch at 5. She found witch's marks on her knees at 7. She started living in her garden, in her parents' garden, for like 3 years until she decided to go to the inner city, where she started doing sex magic and trance magic, and she meets Gavin, and she has this circle of friends, you know, and she has her art. And her art she really made for herself. She made a lot of the pieces for her altars that she had in her, you know, in her sacred space. And so, but then people really liked it. And so she put it out there. And then of course, 86% of the population is like, oh my gosh, she's painting the devil. Even though they have no education whatsoever on what that really is. And she did try to openly be open about this and talk about it. And say, this is Pan, this is why he has hoofs, this is why he's like this, this is why, trying to educate, but they did not want to hear it. They didn't want to hear it. So I'm very thankful for this woman, because she opened a lot of doors. She really did. She showed that you don't have to be married, you don't have to have an 8-to-5 job. You can do whatever you want to do as long as you're passionate about it and you're true to yourself. And I think she's amazing. I'm so glad that I found this woman. I vibe with her. Very, very much. And guys, I really hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. I love you guys, and I'll see you next week. All right?